The reason, the rhyme, 5 things that mean something to me, and the reasons why. This time, books. First, The Ragged Trousered Philanthropists by Robert Tressell. One of my favourite books, if not my favourite book of all time. It is the greatest work of socialism after the Sermon on the Mount. Written in the early 1900s, it could have been written last week. The way the system works hasn't changed. It explains in detail how we, as the working class, are utilised by those with more money and more brain. And there's a brilliant part in it called The Money Trick, which explains in detail how we get ripped off. As I say, nothing's changed, apart from some of the language that's used. It dates it slightly, but it's genuinely absolutely superb. If you're into socialism, that is, obviously. But I think even the most staunch capitalist to be able to read it and think, hang on, there's 1 or 2 issues here that maybe we should look at again. It's worth trying. And Robert Tressell is buried in Liverpool in Wavertree Cemetery. We are a very left-wing city. But yeah, The Ragged Trousered Philanthropists, Robert Tressell. Next up is The Big Friendly Giant, the BFG by Roald Dahl. Except it wasn't a BFG. I know what you're thinking. You just told us it was. What are you playing at, soft lad? Well, it was in the Netherlands when I was in school. So it was the GVR, or the Grote Vriendelijke Ruis, which is Dutch for the Big Friendly Giant. And it was the teacher who was reading it, and we were all reading along in our books in the classroom, and it was in Dutch. And the reason why it was important to me was, even though the words were in Dutch, it sounded like a very British, or English even, kind of book written by Roald Dahl in his style. Even though the words had been translated, it sounded very much like a British style of book. And it made me realise that my Dutch was of a sufficient enough level that I could be happy going anywhere in the country and speaking to people. And that I'd genuinely learned, and it's embarrassing now that I'm not fluent anymore. But to be fair, we did leave in 1985, and I've not been back since, which again I'm also embarrassed about. But you know, it's a long time, and I've had a stroke. Get off me back, you're not my real mum. Yeah, it's a fantastic book, in any language, no matter which language it is. Listen to it, read it, it's brilliant. The films are good as well. Love Roald Dahl. Up next is Gary Nelson, Left Foot Forward, a year in the life of a journeyman footballer. Just exactly what it says on the tin. This was important to me because, well, my dad was a footballer, although he couldn't really be described as a journeyman. He spent 5 years in the top flight in England, which is now the Premier League, and 2 years in the top division in the Netherlands in the Eredivisie, and has played against some of the best players who've ever played the game. But he did also play in the 3rd and 4th divisions for Wrexham. So give me a bit of an insight into what it's like for someone at that level, someone who's not necessarily going to ever make it, who's not on tens of thousands at the time, hundreds of thousands now, who doesn't drive a Ferrari, who's not going to play for England or whatever country they come from, but is eking out a living. They're having to pay the mortgage, they're having to put food on the table, and it's a struggle. Everything they do is a struggle. Playing for teams that have got no money, but still having to put 100% in, week out. It's absolutely fascinating book. It was the first one I'd ever read where it saw the unglamorous side of things given a spotlight. And he's a brilliant writer, despite the fact that he's a footballer. He can actually write. And he's an Evertonian as well, which always helps. Yeah, it was brilliant. I need to go back and reread it. I think he's written at least another one, which I haven't got round to reading, but I will do. But it was really important reading that. Not everything can be shiny and glamorous. Sometimes you need to get into the underbelly of things, so it was important reading that. If you can find it, give it a go. Gary Nelson, Left Foot Forward, well worth your time. Alex Pester, dear friend. An acoustic guitar, a great voice, and a fantastic songwriter. What more do you need? The Cooper Temple Clause. Who needs enemies? A killer key change indeed. The Cocteau Twins, Bluebell Knoll. Beautiful, beautiful sounds. Kristin Hersh, Velvet Days. An acoustic guitar, a great voice, and a fantastic songwriter. How many times do you need to be told? The Duckworth Lewis method, out in the middle. Anybody who can sing about cricket to make it sound so beautiful is an absolute genius. Iain Banks, The Wasp Factory. Now this one I remember reading, it might have been an interview in a music magazine with somebody in a band that I liked, where they were asking what's your favourite this, what's your favourite that, and when it came to what's your favourite book they said Iain Banks, The Wasp Factory, and in a little blurb after it about how it's a little bit messed up but really interesting. I thought, sounds a bit like me, to be honest with you. So I decided to go and buy it. I think it was released in the mid-80s. I might be wrong there. But I went and bought it. This must have been the mid-90s. Probably mid-90s when I bought it. And I went and got it out of Waterstones, I think it was. All his books were on the shelf and they were all in black and white. Or white and black, depending on which book it was. I thought, this is weird, but it looks really nice. There was a good vibe to it. I'll take this one. It's the thinnest one as well, I think. I'll take this one with me. We'll have a go. We'll see what it's all about. And I couldn't put it down. And it's not messed up. It's slightly out there. But I loved it. I've loved all this stuff ever since. He's someone who is from a similar kind of background as me. He grew up in Scotland. This working class ideal, socialist. Really similar taste in music. When he was writing, it seemed to me as though he was writing just for me. I know it's absolutely stupid, but I think it's a really good sign in a writer that they can make the audience, no matter who it is, feel like this book is written entirely for the person who's holding it right now. I just thought it was superb, and I've gone on to read everything he's done since, including the Iain M. Banks books, which are his science fiction and culture novels, even though I'm not a sci-fi fan. I like his writing that much that I went and read them, and they're brilliant as well. So it's really important for me because it got me into this. It was the gateway into a world that I absolutely love. Things like The Crow Road, the BBC made a three-part series out of it, and it was brilliant, absolutely superb. It's got Peter Capaldi in it. What more can you ask for? His writing is very descriptive. It's very Scottish, not like Irvine Welsh. You can actually understand what he says in his books. But he describes the sort of the nature and the landscape of Scotland very well, and what life is like growing up there, which again spoke to me a lot about growing up in Liverpool. It's a similar kind of thing, and he sounded like the kind of person that you probably could go to school or uni with, or you could have a pint with down the pub. Just his writing came across that way, so I loved it, and that was the gateway. The Wasp Factory was my little gateway into his world, and I'm glad that I knocked open that door and got through it. Some amazing stuff, but start off with that and work your way up. I would do. In fact, I did. Yeah. Iain Banks, The Wasp Factory. Amazing. Next stop, Execution by Oleg Gordievsky. Oleg Gordievsky was a KGB agent who eventually defected to the West to work with the British spy agencies. You know, the ones that don't exist, that have got big buildings in London, them ones, yeah. Now, this is really important. Back in '88, we bought Spycatcher by Peter Wright, which wasn't allowed to be sold in the UK. But we'd been away to America, so my mum, as soon as she saw it at the airport over in LA, I think it was, just picked it up. We're having that. And I loved it. I love all that spy stuff, the real life spy things. So I read that and I thought it was superb. Then a few years later, this book appeared. Oleg Gordievsky was a KGB agent at the same time as Peter Wright was working for the Brits. So there's a huge amount of crossover between what they experienced and some of the things that happened. And seeing it was really, really important, seeing this from the Russian point of view, despite the fact that Oleg Gordievsky eventually defected. It's seeing his insight and his knowledge into how these things affected the Russian side, what could have happened, what could have happened to him and his family, what could have happened in terms of the Cold War. Absolutely fascinating. His story about how he got out of Russia to get into the hands of the West to be protected is absolutely amazing. It genuinely is. But it really was an important book because to me it said, don't just read one side of things. I know it's quite important. You've got to be careful. Got to be careful not to fall into an echo chamber where all you're reading or all you're listening to is the same side of thing constantly, but also you've got to be careful about going too far the other way and reading someone else's opinions. It's not always 100% right. But being able to read two sides of exactly the same stories gives you a really good insight into what was happening. So I thought it was fascinating. And again, I love all the spy stuff. When it's real life James Bond is far more interesting and important than made up James Bond, really is. And shows you how close we came to ultimate disaster back in the 50s, 60s, 70s and 80s. And for someone who grew up as well during the 80s, it's surprising how close we came to falling out big time with the Russians, put it that way. It's available on Audible, I think. Well worth listening to. If you can't pick the book up, it's well worth having a try. Absolutely brilliant. And also try Spycatcher if you can get hold of it somewhere. Obviously it was banned over here because it was letting out all the secrets that we don't want people to know. I love knowing secrets. So there you go. There's my 5 things that mean something to me and the reasons why. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like that 5, why not check out these next? Or even these?